Hello everyone, and welcome to the first official episode of Understanding Metal. Today we're going to cover the origin of metal and go into heavy metal a little bit, mainly given that heavy metal is the first genre and kind of the starting ground for all the other metal genres. But before we start, there's one thing I want to clarify, and that is screamo is not metal. It's a subgenre of emo and post-hardcore, and was an aggressive offshoot of emo music using short songs, and it's in a way very aggressive punk, and essentially the gateway between hardcore and emo. It's just, for those of you who think it's metal, get it out of your heads, it isn't metal. As for the origin of metal, it's a subgenre of rock that came around in the late 1960s and early 1970s, mainly appearing in the United Kingdom and United States, and it comes from blues rock and psychedelic rock. And the bands that created heavy metal developed this thick, massive sound characterized by highly amplified distortion, extended guitar solos, emphatic beats, and overall loudness. And heavy metal lyrics and playstyles are commonly associated with masculinity, aggression, and machismo. And the first heavy metal bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, they all attracted such large audiences despite the fact that critics never really said anything good about them. And during the mid-1970s, the band Judas Priest, they helped start the genre's evolution by not playing with the music's blues influence as it did with other bands. And then there's Motorhead, that introduced a punk rock aspect and increasing the emphasis on speed. So Judas Priest getting rid of the bluesy influence on heavy metal, and Motorhead adding punk rock and emphasis on speed started opening up more and more gateways for changes to metal, and this eventually evolved into all the different genres we have today. And bands in the new wave of British heavy metal like Iron Maiden and Saxon, they did that in a similar way as well, and that started to evolve. So before the end of the decade, an interesting side fact here is when fans of heavy metal got the name headbangers or metalheads. That name came pretty early on. Okay, now back on track. And underground scenes produced a variety of more extreme, aggressive styles, like thrash metal, another very popular music genre, broke into the mainstream with bands like Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Overkill, and Anthrax. Now moving on to the Black Sabbath side of the origin. The many bands that they inspire have focused lyrically on dark and depressing subject matters, and as an example, Black Sabbath's Paranoid album from 1970, which included songs dealing with personal trauma like Paranoid, Fairies Wear Boots, and also songs confronting wider issues like War Pigs or Hand of Doom. And then nuclear annihilation was addressed a little later in metal songs like Black Sabbath's Electric Funeral, Maiden's 2 Minutes to Midnight, Ozzy Osbourne's Killer of Giants, Megadeth's Rust in Peace Polaris, and Metallica's Fight Fire with Fire. Death is a very predominant theme in heavy metal, and it commonly features in thrash metal as well, or just with most other bands in general. Just overall, death is a common theme in metal, period. So here are some metal genres. They're separated in these categories: main genres, fusion genres, and subgenres. Like these main genres here, that's what most people know. Just about every metalhead listens to it. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't really know about these genres. Then there are fusion genres, which are also fairly common, or at least like metalcore and grindcore, industrial, deathcore, and progressive metal rock. Those are quite common. And then there are the subgenres, some of which are also quite common, like death metal subgenres and stoner metal. And you're probably wondering what this progressive vegetarian grindcore is here. That's just a little joke we decided to put in. I'll link the video in the description to check that out. It's quite funny. I highly recommend you watch it. Now moving on. So here you can see all these huge metal bands. These are essentially the founders or the forefathers of what metal is today. These are all the classic heavy metal bands and the ones we'll be covering in the next episode or two. So here are some heavy metal samples. You should check out that playlist before the next episode on heavy metal, because if you don't know about it, I suggest you listen to it so you can get a feel of what it's like and not be completely in the dark by the next episode when we really go into the bands of heavy metal. Alright, so that's about it for today, and I hope to see you all next week for heavy metal.
You people out there give us something more than just record sales. You give us something to hate, and we hate you. You brainless mutants.